When Epstein was sentenced in 2008 to 18 months imprisonment for soliciting an underage girl, Peter Mandelson goes and stays in his flat, his townhouse in Manhattan in 2009. And at the time, Peter Mandelson's business secretary. So we've got the business secretary staying in the townhouse in Manhattan of someone who's been convicted of paedophilia. Now, my question is, you find this out, presumably you've got a researcher who can do what, my researcher did, and you find this out. Did anybody ask him about this? I mean, and when did anybody ask him about this?
Well, as I say, I've probably gone as far in answering this question as I can. The Prime Minister has described, as I say, in quite some detail the decisions that he took and why he took them. And as I say, the questions you are raising are about the judgment part of this exercise, which, as I say...
I'm not asking questions about that. What I'm asking about is not the judgment, because as you've said, it wasn't your judgment, it was the judgment of the Prime Minister. What I want to know was the Prime Minister let down? Was the Prime Minister told that Epstein had stayed in Mandelson's flat?
Right.
Sorry. That Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's flat in Manhattan in 2009 when Epstein was serving 18 months for paedophilia. Was the Prime Minister told that? And was the Prime Minister told what Mandelson's answer to that challenge was? Because if the Prime Minister wasn't told that, we can hardly say, pass the blame on to the Prime Minister for not using his judgment. What information was he given?
Nobody is passing blame anywhere. I'm simply factually describing what happened, and that question is also one that the Prime Minister has been asked and answered on the media, and I believe he has said that he does not believe he was let down either by the process or by anyone involved in the process. I think that was his answer on the 15th of September on Channel 4 News.
Can you give us a list of the articles and the when you refer to the news reporting available at the time? Can you give us the list of the news reports that you sent to the Prime Minister?
I've set out in my letter as far as I can go. If the committee is requesting full information, I'm quite happy to take that question away and see whether there are other things that can be shared. But as I say, I've set out in my letter the information that I can currently make available.
Yeah, so question number one is, did you tell the Prime Minister about Mandelson staying in the Manhattan townhouse during Epstein being in jail? And if you can't answer that, or you can't give us the answer we want, then what media reports did you give to the Prime Minister so that he could at least read it for himself?
I will consider whether there is further information that can be shared, and I will write to the committee.
These are extremely serious crimes that we are talking about. I'm going to ask him the question again. Can he reassure the House that since Kabatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? It's a very specific question for him to answer.
Deputy Prime Minister.
After his release, I put in place the toughest checks we've ever had in the prison system. It is important that Lynn Owens is able to get to the bottom of her work. I suspect there'll be more checks and balances we need to do. What we inherited was a complicated system that they set up, letting people out on the sly. That's part of the problem, and we're trying to fix it.
You were wrong. I hope you're not going for a job at the Treasury. Come on then, James Cameron.
It's on a serious issue, I think, Mr. Speaker, just to be clear. The Telegraph are reporting that a police manhunt has been launched for a second asylum seeker mistakenly freed from prison. The question is, Mr. Speaker, can you advise me on how I can ask the Justice Secretary whether he was aware of this when I asked him about it repeatedly in Prime Minister's question?
Do you want to? No. You put it on the record. Right, let's just move on.
Mr. Osborne, you mentioned in an interview that you regret the amount of capital cuts that you made during that period, and you mentioned just then that you attempted to course correct why was there the attempt to cut capital spending at a time when interest rates were almost zero? So you would have had effectively free money for the government to invest.
Well, I mean, so we were operating off essentially the baseline that we inherited from the late Alistair Darling, and he had built in plans to cut the deficit, which at the time was 11% of GDP, and he had a big cut in capital spending, and we in the coalition said we were actually doing better than what we'd inherited. But of course, with the passage of time,
that's not what residents or
of course, with the
feel.
passage of time, you look back on it and you go, I mean, this is a challenge which is sort of easier to see when you're outside Parliament than when you're in it. At the time, you think you're doing one better than the people who came before you, and you're outfoxing your political opponents. But then you take a step back and go, well, maybe that just was the wrong thing, and we should have totally rethought the capital budget. And then we definitely cancelled some things which we later had to reinstate, or wanted to reinstate, which obviously was not ideal. But I do think, even if we'd massively increased the capital budget, first of all, it would have put more pressure on current spending at a time when we had such a high budget deficit. It would also all put more pressure to raise taxes. And the borrowing, it's all very well saying zero interest rates or negative interest rates. At the time, a lot of our European neighbours were in fiscal crises. Greece,
we weren't in the euro at the time. But
yes,
I'll pass back.
No, but the Liz Truss mini budget, or the quasi-Kwarteng mini budget, and this Chancellor's experience twice in the last year, once when she was doing the budget and once a couple of months ago in Parliament, when it looked like she might quit, shows you how close Britain is to suddenly the market taking a different view.
I don't think she was looking to quit, just to be really clear.
No, but the market thought she might.
Okay, let's just be to be clear.
No, of course.
Yeah, I just want to be clear for the record. Sir Vince.
Well, I would confirm that. And actually, this is something we did have quite a lot of strong internal debate about in the coalition, about why we couldn't borrow at low interest rates for investment. And the answer, I think, George has given, that what the advice we were getting from Treasury and our economic advisors was that the bond markets don't distinguish between capital and current spending. It's all borrowing. That was the argument that was thrown back at us. I think with hindsight, many things that the coalition did in fiscal policy that I strongly defend, even though they're unpopular. But I think this is one area where, with the benefit of hindsight, we could have taken a different track. But bear in mind the specifics. I mean, the one big public investment that was in front of us was HS2. I think it still accounts for half of public sector spending. I think when it came to our cabinet, the benefit cost ratio for HS2 was about 1.6 or something, which is barely credible. Then a subsequent government decided to do the low value part of the project rather than the high value part of the project. But we're not dealing with this in abstraction. We were dealing with real world problems in terms of borrowing and real world problems in terms of a limited range of projects, of which that was the biggest one.